just want to speak briefly on something I will tag assuming for the scripture, assumptions of people into the scriptures. So many of us, while we study the Bible, while we are reading our Bible, we read our mind into the Bible. And this is one of the major reasons why we have a lot of misinterpretations today. Verses picked out of context, scriptures that we quote outside of the intention of the writer. You don't assume for the scripture. It is a great error to assume that this is what the scripture is saying. The scripture is more than enough to explain itself. Scripture, you use the scripture to explain the scripture. So sometimes when we pick out verses from a scripture, we might pick it out of context. Let me share a brief example. And this is example that we found in Luke chapter 24. If you start reading from verse 22, you will see that two disciples, they were on a journey, they were going, and Jesus walked up to them. That was after Jesus resurrected and before he revealed himself to the disciples. And they were talking, and Jesus walked up to them and said, "What were you saying?" And they said, "Are you a stranger in Israel that you don't know what has happened? We are talking about the Jesus Christ of Nazareth who was crucified." Now note this. They said, "We thought he was the one who would have redeemed Israel. We thought he was the one to redeem Israel. We thought he is the one that would redeem Israel." Now notice that statement, we thought. So they assumed. Now, one of the assumptions of the Jews was that they thought the Messiah would be coming to save them from the Roman rule. These people, they've read the scripture, they've listened to the scripture, to people teaching the scripture, reading the scripture to them. When I say scripture now, I mean the Old Testament. For example, we can find some of these prophecies about the Messiah in Micah chapter 5, verse 2 to 6, Jeremiah 23, verse 5 to 6, talked about what the Messiah will be coming to do. Now, this verse talks about the Messiah coming from the lineage of David to save Israel, to ensure peace. But they assumed this will be saving them from the Roman Empire rule and making the world to come under one rule, which in the spiritual sense is different from what they were thinking. They never saw the Messiah as one coming to save them from sin. And this is a major error that has led a lot of people to believe that Jesus is not the Messiah. Jesus is not the Christ. Stop assuming for the scriptures. When you assume, let the scripture explain itself. Another example, one of these happened when John the Baptist, in Luke chapter 7, John the Baptist sent his disciples. He said, "Go to Jesus. Go and ask him, are you the Messiah or you are the one, or we should expect another?" Now, let's look at the response of Jesus. Luke chapter 7, if you read from verse 18 down to 22, Jesus said, "Go and tell John that the lame walk, the blind see, the blind receive their sight, the captives are set free, the poor receive the word of freedom, the word of liberty. The good news is preached to them." What is Jesus quoting here? Jesus was pointing them. Now, the response of Jesus to this question was different in the literal sense. But if you look at it scripturally, Jesus was quoting, he was telling them what Isaiah said about the Messiah in Isaiah chapter 61. Said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to heal." Now look at those miracles that pointed the Messiah. Jesus pointed to those disciples, said, "Look at it. The blind are seeing, the lame are walking." He said, "So go and tell." So what is he trying to do? He's using the scripture to explain to them what the Messiah is coming to do. Maybe John the Baptist made this assumption too. He was in prison when he sent his disciples. He was in prison. He was put in prison because he queried Herod for taking his brother's wife. And probably John the Baptist was like, the Messiah we are expecting is here, but we are still under this rule. The same assumption. You don't assume for the scripture. So Jesus had to reply them using the scripture to explain to them this is what the Messiah is coming to do. And that is what I've done. He told them, he said, tell him what you see. The lame walk, tell him about the miracles, because this is what was explained that will happen when the Messiah comes, what he will do. We don't assume for the scripture. Let the scripture explain itself. Many doctrines, many teachings, many understandings we think we have today that we think, I'm not, please quote, note this, I'm not trying to judge or say, in fact, I'm not pointing to it, but just note my point. My point is, when you assume for the scripture, there is every tendency that you come out with error. You don't assume this for the scripture. You let the scripture speak for itself. How does the scripture speak for itself? The scripture will explain itself with the scripture. You set that you read in context. If possible, read the whole chapter because of a single verse to get what you are saying. Don't isolate a verse. Don't assume this is what the scripture is saying. Some things are literal, some things are figurative, etc. etc. It will be wrong for you to think what was figurative was literal, and it will be a great error to think what was literal was figurative. What am I trying to say? Calm down. You want to study the scripture? Now, read the scripture in context. If there are things you don't understand, make research, but stop assuming for the scripture. And I see you blessed. Thank you very much. God bless you.